I don't know if the listeners can tell, but I I kept that intro short, which is an indication that we are no longer in studio together.
We're not, but I think it's going to be great.
I think as we take this opportunity, we got our first text message to the show, sent to the show last week. And I just want to read it out here, and we can kind of just comment on it here. From Norristown, Pennsylvania. We got a text here that says, Harland Williams has used your intro music in his podcast. Upon hearing it, however, I immediately thought of the Nailing History Boys. So I guess we're making an impression out there somewhere.
Wow.
John, do you know who Harland Williams is?
I'm unaware, but if he's willing to steal our intro music, he must be a pretty stand-up guy.
I mean, I guess he's got a Roadcaster. Be my guess.
You bought it on sale too?
Maybe. Or maybe they gave him one for free. He's more famous than us. He was in the film Rocket Man, and he was in the film Half Baked, and you may know him from the film Dumb and Dumber. Have you ever seen that film,
I have.
John?
Wait, does he play the guy in Half Baked? Does he play like the Mr. Smiley? Oh, no. Oh, this guy. Oh, I know him. He's the guy that gets...
Yeah, he was the police officer. And
cop in Dumb and Dumber, right? And he's the guy in Half Baked. He's the guy that gets... They need to bust out of prison, right? He's in jail.
Yeah, he's the one that killed the horse cop, or the cop horse. Horse cop. The horse. Yes. And they had to break him out of jail. I love horses.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for that text. We really appreciate it. We're really happy to know it works, and that our podcast is the first thing that came to mind. So thank you so much. This is why we do it. It's why we get out on this. It's why we get on the mics every week. Knowing that engagement's going to be there. So thank you, Van, so much. Really appreciate it. So for any of our listeners, so this will be released on August 8th. So
8th.
That'll be released.
God
will
willing.
be released on August 8th.
Editor's note: it wasn't.
So that'll be the 1 week anniversary of what some of our listeners I'm sure have heard of as being the largest prisoner exchange involving the United States and Russia since the end of the Cold War. So yeah, Matt, as you probably might have heard, on August 1st, we had a big prisoner exchange with some other players. Were able to secure the release of some pretty important hostages who were definitely in the headlines there for a while. I've been reading the Wall Street Journal with some regularity as of late, and it seems like every other article they have is about this reporter that worked for them, that presumably still works for them, by the name of Evan Gershkovich. And
that's an interesting last name.
It's a mouthful. But basically they were saying from the get-go, so we're not going to get all into the nuts and bolts of who was all swapped and this and that, but just kind of this...
Just listen to Alex Jones. He'll fill you in on all the details.
Totally, 100%. So the Wall Street Journal. So basically, he was put under trial, and I don't know if that was kind of an accelerant for like them pushing to get this swap done, but basically, the Wall Street Journal was saying he was wrongfully accused, and like in June, just this past June, like
wrongfully accused of what?
Of espionage. So he was the first journalist since the end of the Cold War, which ended in 1991. He was the first Western journalist accused of espionage. But from what I read, and I don't know the nuts and bolts of everything related to his case, that he was given a pass to be able to report for the Wall Street Journal in Russia. Russian authorities said he breached whatever. They accused him of espionage. He's been detained now was detained since March of 2023. Marking the first time
It's like a little bit over a year.
A little bit over a year, marking the first time a journalist working for an American newspaper outlet had been arrested on charges of spying in Russia since the Cold War. And basically his employer and other newspapers have been kind of calling for his release. But it turns out that this prisoner exchange has been in the works for a while. So just kind of a quick background on this prisoner exchange, and then we'll kind of get into we're going to look at some of the history of other famous exchanges, because the thing I've been seeing with this on the news reports is that it's the most complicated prisoner exchange ever. And some are saying, even including the Cold War, but then, some are saying we haven't had a prisoner exchange on this level since the Cold War. So that got my head scratching, saying, well, what else did we do during the Cold War? Like, were there any other big prisoner exchanges, between us and the Soviets during that 50-year Cold War? So that, that's kind of what we found. But in a nutshell, with this current exchange that happened on August 1st, they said it was at least 6 months of secret multilateral negotiations where Russia and Belarus, they ended up releasing 16 detainees, while the U.S., Germany, Poland, Slovenia, and Norway collectively released 8 detainees and 2 minors. So not so much a one-for-one.
Like minors, like children, or minors like by occupation?
Children in this case. I don't know, in a past life, maybe some of the Russian detainees had worked in a coal mine somewhere in Siberia. I don't know.
So this was kind of like a blockbuster, like you would consider this like similar to like a blockbuster multi-team trade in, say, the NBA.
I would say yes.
Our boys
came home. And so Evan Gershkovich, he was like big.
And ladies.
There was
our boys and ladies.
Yes, there were women. So Biden had to like work with Olaf Scholz, who's the prime minister of Germany, and saying, hey, like, would you be willing to give Putin back this guy by the name of Vadim Krishkov, who was a convicted murderer he was an assassin, basically, killed this guy who was he was a former Chechen fighter who was fighting against the Russian states way back when. And so he was kind of like a known like killer we gave back to the Russians. And so, but yeah, big thing that's been going on in the works for a while. We've had some people are critical of it. Others are, really congratulatory. Why it happened at this exact moment in time, I'm not totally sure. But so that's the story of the week. And so with that, we kind of got really interested, and I, like I said, I was asking questions.
Story of the week.
I got interested in.
You gotta have a jingle for that.
You got it made up?
No, I'll think of it. We're just the story, like the flavor of the week. How's that song go? Just the flavor of the week. Be like
American Hi-Fi.
Yeah. That'd be good.
So,
see how my creative brain just moves so quickly. I could just think that.
Really,
it's just like next level creativity.
It's just coming through. Some of them that we got were actually Russian nationals, and one guy was like, "Well, hey, per the Russian constitution, you can't deport a Russian citizen if they don't want to be deported." But Putin didn't care about that one, so he kicked him out anyway. But
wait, so they sent Russian nationals out of Russia back to U.S.?
Well, to Germany. Well, this one guy, Vladimir Kara-Murza, he was an opposition politician.
Putin was just like, we don't want you.
He's like, fine, like, we're secure release. He's like, well, wait a minute, like, I'm a Russian citizen. Like, this is my home. I don't agree with the government. I don't like you, but like, I'm still Russian. Like, but he's like, no, like,
not
we'll secure
anymore.
your release.
Hey, that's actually, if you don't like it, I'm happy that they're home.
Everyone involved.
I'm happy that they're. Yeah, why not? The taxpayers don't have to pay for the Russians over here. They're their problem now. I don't know. I like it.
So, so like I said, we were at Matt and I were hanging out. Like what can we talk about this week? I said we should really talk about this week. I think there's going to definitely be some history tied to it. So let's see what we got. And that got me That reminded me of a film that I saw, came out about 9 years ago, starring Tom Hanks. It's called Bridge of Spies, and it was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it tells the story of a prisoner swap that happened in the early 60s between the Americans and the Soviets at the time.
Wasn't it the late 50s?
Yeah, so in the film, it starts out in the late 50s, and but it's actually the time sequence they really don't get into. So we're not going to kind of give you a synopsis of the film. We're going to kind of go more into the actual historical background of the event.
It was a good movie. You guys should watch it.
Yeah, so really good movie, starring Tom Hanks. One of the actors won Best Supporting Actor. Like, I think it won a couple Academy Awards, or at least nominated for a few. So it's a good movie. It's good pace. But basically, yeah, it's basically the telling of the negotiations behind a prisoner swap between the Americans and the Soviets, with a little bit of East German Stasi sprinkled in, who were they were the security force, the security arm of the East German state, which after World War II, Germany was divided in half into West Germany and East Germany. West Germany was in the sphere of the Americans. East Germany was in the sphere of the communists, not just the Soviets, but the communists more generally. And it does a whole telling. So we figured this episode will give a little more background on exactly what happened, or maybe before we get into that, I know Matt was taking some notes on the movie itself. Don't know if you have any feedback or things. We were watching the movie together, but we weren't really hashing out any kind of, we weren't really sharing any notes or ideas during the film. We thought we'd leave it on air, keep it candid. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything to say about the movie necessarily.
Yeah.
I was just reading through my notes. I'll have some comments as we go through the story. Sure. The one thing that I'd just like to point, well, I don't know if we should spoil it for the fans, but I'm going to anyway. As the movie starts out, the gentleman convicted of espionage, Robert Abel, what's his name?
Rudolf Abel.
He's like, they show him painting a lot, and the whole theme of throughout the movie is that this guy likes to paint. He's painting in his room, goes to a park to go paint. When he's in prison, he asks for
pencil,
for like art supplies so that he can just keep himself busy. So like he was just an artist. And when we first, like the opening scene with him painting this picture, I believe I said out loud, he's going to paint a picture of Tom Hanks by the end of this film. And John, what happened?
He sure did. Matt nailed it.
He nailed
it. Big time.
I nailed it. And it was like it was so funny when that happened, because it was kind of like a big reveal at the end of the movie. Like he's like, here, this might be of use to you. And it was in like a tube. And then Tom Hanks is in a plane coming home after doing the prisoner swap, and he opens it up in the plane and it shows the portrait of him. And it was a big, big win that I needed. So I really liked that.
And as Matt mentioned, so this guy was accused.
I'm usually not right about that stuff. You can ask. I have a lot of friends who we see a lot of movies together, and I'm always trying to guess what's going to happen in the films, and I'm not right a lot. But this time I totally nailed it. And it just made me feel really good.
Yeah. I don't know how a portrait of someone's going to help them. I don't know. It seems a little self-conceited. I don't know if Tom Hanks' character didn't seem overly self-absorbed, I guess. But I guess this gentleman thought, hey, he's going to really appreciate this picture. Yes, the movie's good. But like I said, we're going to focus on kind of the real history here of this prisoner swap. And we'll see where it goes. It could be a little circuitous because there's this real history. It's nothing like kind of what the movie tells, at least the kind of setup in the film. So, yeah. So the long and short of it is that in 1962, so the movie was called Bridge of Spies. And the Bridge of Spies it was a bridge that connected West Berlin with Potsdam. which is in the greater Berlin area. And so at the time, in the early 1960s, it was just after the Berlin Wall was built. It was put up in 1961. And so that was a hard border between West Berlin and East Berlin. And now, like I said earlier, you had West Germany and East Germany divided in two, but Berlin, which was entirely in the East German territory, the city itself was split in two. West Germany was part of the American sphere, and East Germany was communist.
We got it.
Anyway, so there's a Bridge of Spies where they did this swap, and that's the bridge is called the Quirky Bridge.
All right, dude. I don't think we need to know about the bridge.
Kleiniki Bridge. Well, I'm trying to set it up. Okay, so there was a prisoner swap.
Right.
So there was a prisoner swap.
All right. Well, all right. Let's rewind. Let's start with how they got captured.
Okay.
What they did in order to get captured. Let's start with that. And then we can go through the change of command.
Just say that there was a swap between a Russian held prisoner and an American held prisoner that happened in 1962. So, but rewinding, how did each side come about acquiring these prisoners? So we'll start with a gentleman by the name of Rudolf Abel, whose real name was William August Fisher. And he was a Soviet intelligence officer, and he was arrested on charges of conspiracy to espionage by the FBI in 1957. Now, a little bit of backstory with this guy. So how he got caught is actually an interesting story. So in the film, I'll kind of, again, spoiler here. What happens is the movie opens up, and this gentleman is basically being tracked down by the FBI. He's in Brooklyn, and he's got his paint set, and he ends up at a park, and he's out there and he's painting the scene, like he's painting a bridge and the Manhattan skyline. And what happens is you have these FBI guys who are kind of just in their cars, kind of trying to keep a low profile, making sure he doesn't make any sudden movements or see if he does anything that they can, pin on him. And while he's sitting at this bench, he reaches down to adjust his paint easel, right? And while he's doing that, he grabs a nickel, and this is important because this is like where it kind of separates from the truth here. He grabs a nickel, and then he puts it in his pocket, and goes back to the apartment. And it turns out that this nickel, he actually is able to split in two. And within this nickel is a microfilm, which has all of this information on it, which is like undecipherable. You can't make heads or tails over it. And so then, but basically the FBI comes in, they bust down the door. Like he's sitting in his he's standing in his tighty whities, like brushing his teeth. And then they're like, well, you've been accused of espionage.
This is in the film. In the film, I had a note that said, here come the alphabet boys.
Yeah, they came in hot. So then, he's accused of espionage.
It would be funny if the note said, I'll give you a nickel to tickle my pickle.
It could have said that. It probably did. I don't speak Russian, I think it was in numbers, maybe numbers deciphering. But what happened in actual life was 4 years prior, so in 1953. So this is what happened in true story. In 1953, there was a 14-year-old kid on a paper route in Brooklyn. He was going around, I guess, collecting old newspapers from the week. And, you go around, he's getting tips, like people are giving him nickels and dimes and, pennies and whatnot. He's just trying to make a few dollars, hopefully, on his paper route. And he ends up getting all this money, making his route, but then he starts counting the change in his pocket just to kind of make sure like he actually has what he has. And he sees one of these nickels and he picks it up and he's like, this doesn't feel like a real nickel. And so he starts kind of looking at it, and then he accidentally drops it on the ground. And when he drops it on the ground, it splits in half, and he sees there's this microfilm in it, or this piece of paper. He doesn't even know what it is. So he sees it, and then he starts like telling kids at his school, and he tells this one girl in particular whose father is a New York police officer. So she tells her dad, and then he's like, well, let me talk to this boy and see what's going on. And then the boy basically gives him this nickel. The nickel then ends up making its way to an FBI agent through the New York cop. So the FBI keeps it on file. And so then 4 years later, there's a guy by the name of Reino Haihanen who ends up basically defecting from the Soviet Union. So he was on the employ of the KGB. And he was basically working with this gentleman that you see depicted in the film, Rudolf Abel. But apparently he said they were going to basically, the KGB was going to shut him down, Haihanen, saying, dude, you're like, because he was a drunk and he couldn't kind of keep his head straight on missions, and he was kind of letting stuff kind of go by the wayside. But he had some inside knowledge on Mr. Abel. And so when he defected in Paris in 1957, the CIA basically sent him back to the US, and he was questioned by the FBI. And he basically was just telling the FBI, like, well, this is what we do as KGB officers. You know, we'll use everyday objects to kind of hide things like microfilm and other ways of kind of covering our tracks. We'll use, you know, empty pencils, and we'll use, you know, nickels or other coins to kind of hide and try to, you know, use transport microfilm in with secret messaging. And so they said, oh, really? And he's like, yeah. And they said, well, what about, we've got this coin that we've had for 4 years now. What do you know about this? And it turns out that this guy was actually given this coin 4 years ago when he was first sent by the KGB on assignment to America. He accidentally spent it either buying newspapers, or so it ended up in circulation somehow. And then this boy on this newspaper route ends up getting the coin.
Oh my God.
And so he's like, oh yeah, I know about that. And he was able to help the FBI decipher the code. And the code really wasn't anything that crazy. It was basically just a welcome message from his KGB handlers that were already in the United States, one of which was Rudolf Abel. So this guy you see in the movie. And basically he helped the FBI kind of get a lead on Abel. And so that's how they were able to the FBI was actually able to get a, you know, a lead on Abel, track him down, kind of just see what he was doing. And one thing led to another. They were able to kind of say, hey, we're going to charge you with espionage. They then, after that, they went into his apartment and found a lot more kind of espionage equipment and all that stuff.
I think they originally arrested him for like being an illegal immigrant.
Yeah, after they initially arrested him, they sent him down to Texas to be in holding as like an illegal alien. But then once they found out he was going to be charged with espionage, they were able to they sent him back up to New York.
Yeah.
So then, basically Abel went on trial, and he was defended by a lawyer by the name of James B. Donovan. And Donovan did not really want to represent him. No one really wanted to, it's the 50s. No American worth their salt, American lawyer that is, wanted to represent a convicted spy, basically. But James Donovan was put to the task by the Bar Association, basically nominated him to take up the case. It didn't matter. They ended up sentencing Abel to 30 years in prison. He was found guilty. And so that was in 1957. And so then he ended up staying in jail. So he's in jail. So that's part one. That's first prisoner. So that's how Abel ends up in prison. The long and short of it. As that's all going on, the movie kind of laces in, like, as he's being convicted, there's another side of the story where basically a gentleman by the name of Francis Gary Powers is tasked by the CIA to fly a U-2 spy plane over Russian airspace and basically used these new high-grade cameras, which can, film from 70,000 feet up in the air and, take pictures of, different Soviet installations or what have you, spy mission, intelligence gathering. And what happens is, as he's in this incident, he gets shot down. So the Americans didn't think that the Soviets in 1960 had the capability to shoot down aircraft flying at that
70,000
at that height, because there were other previous missions. There were missions before this where we were sending over spy aircraft. It's before satellites were doing that work, and so he's shot down, and miraculously he's not killed. But they tell him, if you get shot down, there's a self-destruct button in your cockpit to blow up the whole aircraft so that the Russians can use nothing. Like, if you get shot down, like, there's nothing you can't get, like, taken out. You're either going to be successful in the mission, or you're going to blow up the whole aircraft so they can't use anything. Neither one of those two things happen, and he shot down.
Yeah, in the film it was some nonsense where he got outside the plane and he was trying to reach the destruct button, but he couldn't.
It reminded me of Hot Shots.
Didn't want to.
I don't know if you remember the Hot Shots scene where that's the case. They're walking on the plane.
I never saw that film.
Yeah.
But here was a question that I have written down. So they also told him that if he gets captured, to take a cyanide pill. So there's this general thing that I guess people were mad, the military was mad at this guy. So the plane crashed and the Russians got to him and captured him. So he survived the plane crash, like John said. The plane survived. I think even the cameras that they were super high-tech, high-powered cameras actually survived. So Russia was able to really know exactly what he was there for. But they told him that if you get captured, to take a cyanide pill. They gave him a cyanide pill to take. I think it was, I don't know if it was a cyanide pill, but some kind of cyanide. And he didn't do that. So there was a comment oh, the military's mad at you anyway because you didn't follow orders. But do you think if you were shot over in the Cold War, if you were shot over Russian airspace, would you rather take a cyanide? So if your plane was going down, would you rather take a cyanide pill in the plane, go down in the blaze of glory with the plane, or parachute into Russia and hope that you don't get captured?
Well, I guess I was a little confused too I thought he was supposed to, by blowing up the aircraft, it would just blow him up too. So I don't even know why he didn't take cyanide. And if he took cyanide, how would he blow up the aircraft? I think they designed the planes so that you hit the self-destruct button and then you had enough time to
out,
and then you could do the cyanide thing in
parachute, hopefully down the safe. But then the cyanide thing would be once you got captured.
Got it. Which was going to definitely happen.
So
it's why didn't he kill himself? Just stay in the plane.
Yeah. I feel like I'd go down. I'd either self-destruct it in the plane, or go fly it into the ground in a blaze of glory. Try to take out some kind of cool target.
Well, they specifically said, "Don't. Your life is the plane is more valuable, and the intelligence and the technology in the plane is way more valuable than your life. So don't crash it into anybody."
And he just ignored. Well,
he tried to, he tried to self-destruct, but then his parachute ripped off the plane, and he ended up. He just couldn't.
And it might be the story that he told when he got home, when he had to answer to the big boss. What happened? I thought you were supposed to blow up the plane. Oh, man, you'll never believe it, man. The windshield cracked, and then I got sucked out of the plane, but I still tried to get back. I was clawing my way back in there, and I was an inch from hitting that destruct button, and then I forget what happened, but he got taken away. You'll never believe it, sir. I was so close. You know,
people just weren't buying some of his nonsense. One of the head of the CIA counterintelligence thought he was defecting. He thought it was actually, he called BS. He thought he was.
Yeah.
And the media basically covered it up
you never
pretty
know.
soon. They said it was a weather balloon. What do they say? A weather plane.
A weather plane that got lost or something over Turkey.
Yeah. So that was the
Right?
cover-up story by the U.S. government. But yeah, how he survived is crazy. I don't know how. Just managing to get out there. But
Almost too crazy, if you ask me.
yeah.
I think the CIA might have been on to something.
Yeah. Well, from what
But he got, and then Russia paraded him around, made it a big spectacle that they caught him and that they were trying him and that they were, imprisoning him and whatnot.
yeah. So and then he was convicted. He was sentenced to 10 years confinement, 3 of which were to be in prison with the remainder in a labor camp.
Ooh.
Yeah. And he was held at Vladimir Central Prison, about 150 miles east of Moscow. He kept a diary and a journal while he was confined, and he learned carpet weaving from his cellmate to pass the time.
Dude, if I was caught in Russia, there's no way I'm not taking a cyanide pill. Are you kidding me?
Well, it was a pin that was also in a coin. So they gave him like a silver dollar, and in the silver dollar there was like a pin. And they said
Yeah.
it'll.
On the film.
Well, I think that's what real life too. But from what I'm seeing, so the film doesn't get into so much of his his marital affairs. But
Oh, please. Are we going to get into this?
what? Why they decided to trade him? So the reasoning, from what I'm reading, they decided to only give him up. Enough people higher ups in the CIA were like, he's useless. He would have already told the Soviets what they needed to know. He's no good to us anymore. So just forget about him. Like, we're not going to trade Abel, because another thing about Abel, when he was imprisoned and during the lead up to his trial, he didn't speak. He didn't break. He didn't give secrets. He didn't really talk much. So like the Americans got very little information out of Abel. The CIA, for whatever reason, I guess they had enough reason to believe that Powers would have talked, that the KGB would have broken him basically, and he would have told them everything. And the fact that they know that the Russians got the aircraft and the cameras and all the technology. So like they said the Soviets had the winning hand. So they were just like ready to leave him there. But apparently his wife, they were like super concerned that his wife would cause like a major scene. And they said, well, if he starts to worry about
Really?
her, like he might squeal even more to the Soviets. Like it's like if his wife, his wife was apparently drinking and having affairs all the time. She was pulled over by police on June 22nd, 1961. To avoid bad publicity for the wife of the well-known CIA operative, a doctor is tasked by the CIA to keep Barbara out of the limelight, arranged to have her committed to a psychiatric ward in Augusta, Georgia, under strict supervision. She was eventually released to the care of her mother. However, the CIA feared that Gary Powers, languishing in Soviet prison, might learn of Barbara's plight and as a result reach a state of desperation, causing him to reveal to the Soviets whatever secrets he had not already revealed. Thus, Barbara unwittingly may have aided the cause of the approval of the prisoner exchange involving her husband and Rudolf Abel. Angleton and others, so Angleton was the chief of counterintelligence CIA, and others of the CIA still opposed the exchange, but President John F. Kennedy approved it.
That's
Jim
lame.
Donovan is effectively tasked by the CIA. He's not representative of the government. He goes over and he has to basically be a representative. He's basically going over there as the attorney for Rudolf Abel. He goes over to East Berlin to talk to the Soviet embassy, and he basically tries to play negotiator for the exchange. That's how the movie sets it up. That's right. And you got this Frederick Pryor character, who in the film is very dweebish. But for whatever reason, like Jim Donovan, so Tom Hanks' character is like, all right, yeah, like everyone's saying, all right, Powers for Abel, fine. The CIA is like, fine, we need Powers for Abel. Let's just get our guy back. We'll give him Abel. It'll be fine. It'll be sweet. And Tom Hanks, for whatever reason, he just, feels he's got to take the moral high ground. He's like, and Pryor, like he gets wind that this young PhD student studying in Berlin gets picked up by the East German authorities.
What was his dissertation on?
It was on Communist Foreign Trade System. So
Probably a real barn burner, real page turner, I'm sure. And then in the movie, it's funny because when the GDR policemen, what are they called?
who? The Stasi?
Like capture him or they confront him and they're like, dude, you can't be here. They're like, we're gonna arrest you. He's like, no, it's okay. I'm going to school. I'm studying communism. Look, I'm studying this, and he pulls out his dissertation out of his backpack. It's like real thick, and the police are like, okay, thank you. Yoink, and yanked it from him, and then this guy Pryor's like, oh, that's my only copy. It's classic.
Yeah. So then really said he was in 1959 as part of his doctorate studies, he went to Berlin where he was finishing his thesis and also taking classes at the Free University of West Berlin. In August 1961, days after the Berlin Wall was erected, he visited East Berlin to deliver a copy of his dissertation to a professor there and to contact a friend's sister, an engineer who, unknown to Pryor, in violation of East German law, had just fled to West Germany. The Stasi, the East German secret police, arrested Pryor on charges of aiding the woman's escape. After the police found a copy of Pryor's doctoral dissertation and analysis of Soviet bloc foreign trade, he was accused of espionage and detained without charge. Pryor's cell was directly above an East German torture room. Yeah, he was interrogated but not tortured. So, but in the movie, he looks like
and he like literally had nothing to. He probably had nothing to say, and they're probably like, "This guy, like, what do we do?"
We read the thesis. It's trash. It's why did he spend his time doing this? That's why I really think they picked him up.
Well,
really, like,
it's also kind of like, oh no, I'm not. Oh yeah, no, I'm cool. I'm just writing about communism for my American university. They're probably like, "What are you doing?" Like he's kind of like telling them, like he's self-implicating. He could have just been like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just here,"
You're right. Yeah, really.
For Oktoberfest.
Maybe they wanted to help his dissertation. They're like, well, there, you want to learn about communist economic system? Here, spend a couple years behind bars in a secret police prison. You'll learn all you need to know. But fun fact, when he was after his release, he ended up joining the economics faculty at Swarthmore College for the remainder of his career.
A little local university for us. He died in Newtown Square, I believe.
Yep. So just in the movie, he looks like a real bozo. Just like,
yeah, he really grinded your gears the whole movie.
Well, the wall's like going up, and like you see people literally like jumping out of windows from East Berlin to try to get over the wall before like the thing goes up. And here he is riding his bicycle. I believe that
that's how that actually was. It's kind of crazy if that was actually what was going on. Like people like waited to the last minute, like, oh, that wall's going up, I got to go over there now. You know?
I don't know. They basically have sentries on the East Berlin side in towers, barbed wire fence, and like all this. And you got sentries there. And there's a scene in the movie where they literally just show these sentries just unloading on people trying to jump over the fence. And Tom Hanks is like blown away. He's like, whoa, that's crazy. So
this is real here. And then they coordinated this coordinated this prisoner swap. So it was basically the US, Germany, and Soviet Russia that were all involved in this now, because Germany had one of the guys, Russia had another one, and then the US had the Russian prisoner. And I think it's either both or none. So Russia and Germany kind of had to make the decision of like, yeah, okay, it's worth it to give both of these guys back.
So on February 10th, 1962, Powers was exchanged along with U.S. Frederick Pryor for Soviet KGB Colonel Rudolf Abel. And due to political differences between the Soviet Union and the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany at the time, Pryor was turned over to American authorities at Checkpoint Charlie before the exchange of Powers for Abel was allowed to proceed on the Bridge of Spies, a.k.a. the Glen Ike Bridge. Powers credited his father with the swap idea, When released, Powers' total time in captivity was 1 year, 9 months, and 10 days. So not Jim Donovan. Give him the credit. But Jim Donovan was a main negotiator. So that's the other half of the film, basically.
Definitely an interesting time period, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wonder if there'll be a movie out at some point that about this one.
Yeah, I don't know, but I will say that I know Alan Dulles, who was the head of the CIA at the time, apparently he said he wished he had one spy half as good as Rudolf Abel.
They couldn't get him couldn't get any info from him.
No, he was pretty buttoned up.
Kind of weird.
Even with
that Powers freaking sang like a bird, probably.
No doubt about it. But I guess it does beg.
And he ended up, he died. The little prologue. The Powers died like, I don't know, less than 10 years later. He was a helicopter pilot for NBC News in California, and his helicopter ran out of gas and he died.
Forgot to gas it up. Forgot to hit the Sunoco before he hit the air.
Apparently, like the helicopter mechanic had recently fixed the fuel gauge and he was reading it wrong or something, so he didn't actually know he was out of fuel. But that's kind of where that's what happened apparently. Maybe a little sabotage by the Soviets. I don't know. Maybe. So Mr. Powers was a helicopter pilot that died. Pryor became he got his PhD in economics from Yale University, and then ended up teaching at Swarthmore College in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And then, what happened to Abel?
I'll say, I guess so Pryor, it said Swarthmore didn't care about his imprisonment, he recalled. In fact, I think the students kind of got a kick out of having an ex-con teaching them. So he had a pretty inflated sense of himself. Big man on campus, ex-con. I've dealt with the Stasi. What'd you guys do? Anyway.
Nah, for me, he's not wrong.
So then Rudolf Abel. So after the exchange, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So it's like, maybe even today, some of these guys that are going back to Putin, like you don't know if you're ever going to hear from them again. But especially during the Cold War, if the Soviets thought you talked at all, I mean, like you just disappear. Like they hold over the idea of, okay, come back to us. You'll see your wife, you'll see your kids, but like you just go back into the KGB's arms and you just disappear entirely. But that's not what happened in this case. But it was a bit of a PR. The KGB had to do a little bit of PR massaging with their own population. So it suited their own reputation to reveal Abel's 9 years of being before he was caught, he was basically an active and successful spy for 9 years in the United States, where he was, gathering atomic secrets, spying on U.S. Navy, gaining a kind of submarine knowledge and facts and whatnot.
How do you think they did that? How do you think that happened?
What?
You think there's
a whole network?
There were moles inside.
Yes, he was responsible for kind of organizing a network.
He was pipelined too.
Yeah, he was responsible for like setting up. There was air quotes volunteers, but they were already like cells in the United States that, like, by the time he came over in 1949, he was ordered to reactivate the quote volunteer network to smuggle atomic secrets to Russia. Members of that network had stopped cooperating after post-war security was tightened at Los Alamos, where the nuclear bomb was being developed. But I think from what I was reading about him, he was kind of tasked with kind of pulling a network together, and he was a colonel in the KGB. He was kind of quite a decorated member of the KGB during World War II. He served his country with distinction. Fighting the Nazis, and part of the reason why he was given the assignment in the United States was because of how he served in this one mission in particular. So, for basically helping to beat the Nazis, he was rewarded with coming and spying on America. And he was kind of there for responsible. So then this guy who I mentioned earlier in the show, Reino Heinonen, was sent over 3 years after he came to be his assistant, and the guy was just a buffoon, basically, giving away nickels that had secrets and and he died. Unfortunately, Mr. Heineman had died on the PA Turnpike. Pennsylvania Turnpike took his life. So
it's a dangerous road.
I know. So very complicated, this stuff, but yeah. So Abel lived out the rest of his life. He ended up basically lecturing school children on intelligence work. He made a notable appearance in a Soviet spy film, Dead Season. He also worked as a consultant on the movie. And he was a heavy smoker and died of lung cancer on November 15th, 1971. And a few Western correspondents were invited to his funeral to view for themselves the true identity of the spy who never, quote, broke.
Hey, gotta give it to him.
So,
gotta give it to him.
Buttoned up.
But I feel like somebody like that, I mean, what kind of information would you want to get from him? You would want to get, like, he probably doesn't have many secrets from Russia, right? Like this guy, like he probably doesn't know necessarily what all's going on in Russia, but I guess the information that you would want from him would be identify the rest of the spies or the cells in the within the United States military or government, and let us know who all is there. That's probably the information that they would want from him that he didn't give them, so they say.
Or to kind of, stem a bleed if there is an open network and there is an open courier system of sending that information over to Russia. From a counterintelligence perspective, just stopping that information from leaving. Not necessarily gathering, not forward intelligence, but counterintelligence to basically just, we're not getting more information from them, but we got to stop sending information to them. Apparently. But this whole thing, so nothing but this UT crash. So at the time in the late 50s, there was you got to remember, before Khrushchev came into power in 1953, he was the Soviet premier. Stalin basically didn't talk to the West after World War II. But once he was out, there was definitely still some animosity. There was definitely no trust involved. But by the late 50s, there was a little more, some dialogue going on between the two powers. And once this U-2 incident happened, once that U-2 crashed, it kind of put a dent in some of that stuff. And Khrushchev really didn't appreciate it.
Hey, is that how the band got its name?
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, named after the plane.
Huh. The plane that Powers crashed.
Well, a U-2 was a type of plane. Not just his plane.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why would they name it that?
The image of U2 was used on the cover of the band Nagative's controversial 1991 EP titled U2.
Do you like U2?
They got some good songs.
I don't get it.
Bono has said that the name evokes futuristic images of the, quote, spy plane and the U-boat, but that it still makes him cringe. I guess Bono's not a fan of the name. So change it. Reinvent yourself. Change your name. I mean, the Foo Fighters named their band after those planes in World War II.
Bloody Sunday. Sunday, bloody Sunday. All right, well, that was fun. I enjoyed talking about it, and it's interesting, and it's a good movie. You guys should watch it if you haven't yet. I think that's all I have. You got anything else, John?
No, that's it. Yeah, check the movie out. It's quite interesting, and read a little more Spycraft. Always check your coins too.
I think maybe, hopefully, we keep being gifted these gems of topics to go over in the podcast to kind of give a little context to some
current events,
current events, and the history, some context of maybe there was precedent set for some of this stuff. So, if you're up there and you're like, oh, what do we get for this person, or why do we give this person up for that? There's been a history of that, and as in anything, there's a give and take. With trades in sports or anything that you might see, both sides don't always.
I will
win.
give you a quick question. Maybe just we didn't. Do you think us being a quote democracy and Western ideals and openness like that, they already the other side has the upper hand? It's like, I think anyone who we have to give up a basketball player or we have to give up a journalist for a convicted killer. Like, it's just because, like, as the West, like, Russia knows, like, they're ready to throw mud and sling mud, but they could just ask for such a ridiculous thing, but because the West will, like, go up in arms about it, and we have people that can protest without worry of being thrown in prison, like, enough people will make enough noise that, like, even the higher ups of the CIA is like, it's a really bad trade, but okay, Mr. President, like, we'll do that. Like, what do you think? Because on paper, like, it's not a fair trade.
I think maybe there's a motivation there of like, we have this WNBA basketball player that we can detain, and this is perfect because we can they're going to make a big deal about it, so then we'll be able to use that to get somebody back that, we wouldn't be able to get back otherwise.
Yeah. It's like almost like if you had someone of like maybe a Powers, like in today's terms, like if you had someone who was there on mission spying, like we wouldn't hear about them. And they wouldn't cause them as much. I think people would be like, well, that's just part of the job. It's like, that's the risk you take by being in that line of business, so you get caught. Okay, well, like, thanks for serving your country. But like, I feel like, if you get someone and wrongfully detain a basketball player, like you said, or a journalist who has had the paperwork to even be there. Yeah. If you accuse them of something like that, it's that much more, will cause that much more of an outrage. And I think Russia knows that. We're suckers. Kind of. Not suckers, again, but like, they just know they can get away with it.
I don't want to necessarily make any assumptions. I don't know, but we are assuming that these people were wrongfully accused or, unlawfully detained in Russia, but maybe there's more to it. You don't really know that for sure,
Yeah.
The U.S. lied about that weather plane getting lost over the air. So, there's probably motivation for the U.S. to let the general public know what's going on and behind closed doors, maybe. And maybe there was an actual value to these people that, they're not necessarily letting known, because obviously if they didn't talk in Russia, if they were spies or whatever, you're not going to want to make a big deal about it.
Yeah, you keep it, make it look like, you're
going to want to say that they're
Red Cross employees or high school students or immigration lawyers. Yeah.
They're not going to say like, oh, there's Wall Street journalists that we sent over there to get information that we set up on a mission or whatever. And, they released him. They're not going to say that out loud, for
he worked as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal.
And also,
That's interesting. Well, either way, I know that families are reunited. I mean, I'm not gonna say any. We got people back. Evan's gonna be writing articles for the Wall Street Journal again. I'll probably be reading them. So yeah, we got him back. And you got a little history lesson of other major prisoner swap. So.
Well, on that note, I think that's all we have for you guys for this. If you guys think of anything, any other prisoner exchanges that interest you or that you think of, feel free to drop us a line on Twitter at Nailing History, or send us an email at nailinghistorypod@gmail.com. Or as always, you can hit the link in the description and send us a text message. That'll be anonymous, and we'll give you a shout out on the next episode.
Yeah. We really hope you like this one. We had a good time, and we'll keep on turning them out. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it, and we're enjoying it. We're still enjoying it. 6 months.
Yeah.
It's been great.
6 months. All right, John. Well, you got anything else to leave them with?
You know my words. Stay curious.
We'll give it to them.
Stay curioso.
And with that, this is Matt and Jon signing off.
I got hairy legs.